Right now is criminal defense attorney Walter Hussies, well known for his work on murder cases like this, but he is not working on the Troconis case. So, Walter, thank you so much for being with us to help us understand what's been happening. It's been quite eventful in court.
Yeah, it sure has.
It has, absolutely. So you'll remember, just to get people up to date, you'll remember that Jennifer vanished back in May of 2019. She was in the midst of a divorce and custody battle with her estranged husband, Farber Dulos. Michelle Troconis was dating Jennifer's estranged husband at the time, and he was facing charges for her disappearance and death. But then Farber Dulos died after attempting suicide in January of 2020. Another friend and attorney of Farber Dulos, Kent Mawhinney, is also facing a charge of conspiracy to commit murder. We'll talk a little bit more about him. He has not gone to trial yet. But we want to first break down what we've learned this week. Today, this just happened this morning. A juror was dismissed. Also, the Dulos family nanny was on the stand. And we also saw another alternative juror dismissed. So many would say maybe the nanny was the most interesting, but let's start with what's happened today. We had another juror problem. There was some sort of a note asking the judge, like, why is this juror talking about this case, referring to it as, oh my gosh, it's like Gone Girl. Just to give people an understanding, this is not allowed to happen. Jurors cannot talk about the case at all to each other right now, right?
No, it's really simple. So at the beginning of the case, the judge will instruct the entire jury and say, listen, don't discuss this amongst yourself, not together, not individually, until all the evidence is in and until the judge actually instructs them on the law. Only then can they begin their deliberation. So anything prior like this, it's a no-no for sure.
So we've got a juror who's been instructed to not do that. The instructions are very clear, right?
Very clear, very specific.
So then it goes to the note, and then the judge takes that juror who's made this comment about, wow, this case is like Gone Girl, and apparently that's even been on social media, and he speaks to that juror. That juror ultimately gets dismissed, but everyone else is kind of warned. These are things that, if the defense had wanted, could that have been grounds for a mistrial?
Yeah, but so what happened, I think originally one of the other jurors gave a note to the judge saying, listen, this other juror is acting inappropriately and, you know, concern that person. So they brought the first person that wrote the note. That person told the judge what was said. They brought the person in that made the comment. That person was dismissed. And I think individually, the judge spoke to the rest of the jury and said, listen, can you guys be fair and impartial despite what happened? And I guess they all agreed that, yes, that was the case. And so no one moved for a mistrial. Well, in this case, it would be the defense. But I guess he felt there was no reason to, so the case is proceeding.
So, but in instances like that, when you have juror misconduct, and this is the second juror that's now been dismissed in only 6 days of trial, is that unusual?
Yeah, that is unusual. It's a bit problematic because you would expect the people to follow instructions. They're really simple, but you know, it's human nature. And I don't even know how the comment was made. It could have been flippant, it could have been in jest, who knows? But it's really something that shouldn't happen. But again, we're dealing with individuals. They've never done this before for the most part. And I think most jurors try to do their best, but sometimes they make mistakes, and that has to be cured.
And if you missed it earlier this week, the other problem with the first juror was apparently this juror said, we love you, to one of the prosecutors. Yeah. As a defense attorney, that could be troubling?
Yeah, that could be really troubling. I mean, the first thing I thought about is who would you say that to in general? Like if you didn't know someone, you say, I love you or we love you. I mean, that's really strange. And the only thing I could think of is someone famous, like if you saw Bruce Springsteen or something, we love you, right? And that makes sense. But why would you say that to the prosecution? And what does we mean? We to me implies someone more than the one person that said it. So that to me was a little more problematic than the Gone Girl situation today.
Okay, and if you're not familiar, Gone Girl was a movie and a book where someone just vanished, and of course that was back when Farber Dulos was being charged with murder. That was his attorney, Norm Pattis, trying to say that maybe the reason there's no body is because, you know, she took off. She, just like Gone Girl, she left her family. That was the original theory that Fardis's defense was trying to put forward back in the day. When
he was alive, yeah, that is true. I think there's a little more to it too. I think there was a manuscript that Jennifer had written that he tried to imply that it was something along the Gone Girl lines, and then she was trying to act this out. But to me, that didn't really make any sense because it's really problematic. Because if in fact that were the case, that she staged this whole thing, then how did Farber Dulos wind up in Albany Avenue discarding evidence?
Right.
I mean, so that wasn't going to fly.
So let's get to that part, is that right now, in this week, we've seen DNA evidence. We've seen a very emotional nanny, Lauren Almeida, who started watching the children back in 2012, saying she had a pit in her stomach. She felt like something bad had happened. She talked about the paper towels being moved that she had put there the night before, indicating maybe a cleanup. It's almost like we're going through step by step how Farber Dulos could have murdered her. Why is that so important in this case?
Well, my opinion is this. I mean, so Michelle was charged with what? A conspiracy to commit murder. So by doing so, one of the elements that the state has to prove is that an actual murder happened, right? So they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone actually murdered Jennifer, in this case, Farber Dulos, right? And that's really the person they wanted, let's face it. You know, if he would have gone on trial, I don't know if he would have prevailed, most likely not, but he killed himself. And the problem with that is he left a suicide note, but there was more questions than answers. And I think he exonerated not only himself, Michelle, and Attorney Mawhinney. So, and there was no answers as to what happened to Jennifer. So all those questions need to be answered, and I think for the state, they put so much time and effort into this, all the resources of the state police, all the local police departments that did all this yeoman's work. I think by charging Michelle the way they have, they're able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Farber actually killed Jennifer. And I think that's one of the things they want to accomplish, just for closure. But secondarily, it also adds some emotion where you feel, there's no other way you can't feel for the fact that Jennifer's life was taken, leaving 4 kids, and really just such a callous, heinous way. And maybe some of that gets attributed to Michelle. I mean, it's not supposed to, but you know, human nature being human nature, emotions take over.
Well, it was introduced that the nanny said that that Jennifer Farber Dulos had confided in her that she believed Farber Dulos was having an affair, and the nanny said, "I couldn't believe that he would do that with all these little children, these 5 children." Right. But so just obviously introducing that he was having an affair with Michelle Troconis, and then establishing like what kind of woman would be having an affair with a married man. Is that part of it, of trying to lay character?
You know, it could be, but I think people make bad judgment choices all the time in relationships, and the fact that he was getting divorced is not uncommon for someone that's in the process of a divorce, meeting someone new. So I don't think it really attributes any type of guilt, or I don't think it really means much to me. I don't know if it means anything to the jury. I think what it does mean is they want to prove that he's responsible for her death, and they're fully intending to, and I think they will.
And we're then going to have to hear how they believe she conspired also, because that is one of the charges, conspiracy. Yep. Just take a moment right now, because I understand our reporter who's been covering this gavel to gavel for us, Matt McFarland, is live at the courthouse right now. He's just taking a step out because there's a lunch break, and updating us, of course, while the snow is falling on you, Matt, our other big story. But what an eventful morning. Update us on what's going on and what you've seen and heard in the courtroom.
Yeah, absolutely, Kara. I mean, even before we had testimony this morning, actually, they brought the witness on the stand for that cross-examination to finish up that cross-examination. Kristen Maydell with the State Forensic Lab. Before she could even start to testify with that cross-examination, the judge says, hold on, we got a note from a juror this morning. He had a concerned look on his face, and I'm going to look at my notes just to get it right. The note read by Judge Kevin Randolph was, quote, one of the jurors discussed something about the case. It was all over social media, said it was like Gone Girl, a brief mention. Several other jurors said, don't discuss this, end quote. So had to go into recess to figure out how they were going to handle this sort of concern that they had. Brought everyone back into court. Said what they were going to do was question the person who provided the note, passed the note up, question the person who allegedly said this in the presence of other jurors, and then question each remaining juror one by one if they would be able to continue on in this trial, if they thought this would impact them, if they would be able to be impartial and afford a impartial case to both the state and the defense. You know, after a brief sort of break in that closed courtroom questioning those jurors, judge came back in an open courtroom basically saying that they did all this, they dismissed the juror, the rest of the jurors said they wouldn't be a problem, they would be able to go forward, and then that's where we are now. They wrapped up the cross-examination of that forensic science examiner, and then they started testimony from a lieutenant colonel in the state police, blood pattern analysis sort of expert who's been used to consult in numerous cases. So he's on the stand right now. We'll be back on the stand when they pick up in the afternoon. But this was fascinating to hear. Again, the big story today so far is now we're down another juror. You might remember they had to dismiss an alternate just 2 days ago for something that was said towards the direction of a prosecutor assisting this case. So they started with 6 jurors, 5 alternates. Now they're down 2. So should be an interesting afternoon here.
Matt McFarland live right outside the courthouse. I know you're just taking a break as everyone is taking a break from this case, and then we will be streaming it, and you will have a full report of everything, including what it was like to be in that courtroom and what the mood has been this week. We'll have the top takeaways with you on Eyewitness News starting at 4. Matt, thank you for your coverage.
You got it.
All right, so we're back here with Walter Hussey, our legal analyst, and if you're just joining the streaming, we're talking about, we're down 2 jurors now, and that's really what Matt was talking about, was that the judge gave them instructions. We were waiting to see if the defense might ask for a mistrial. They did not, but we've got these 2 jurors now. Let's talk about that. Growing up, or when people watch court TV, they always see 12 jurors. We have nowhere near 12 jurors in this case. Can we talk a little bit about that, of why that's the case, why we don't have 12?
Were you thinking 12 angry men?
Right,
So,
yeah, exactly.
So anyway, how it works is depending what the charge is, by statute, there's a certain amount of jurors that are going to be allocated. For instance, if she was charged with murder, she'd be entitled to 12 jurors as well as 4 alternates for a total of 16. Not with this case, not with this charge. Although Attorney Schoenhorn did petition the court to have 12. He used some sort of constitutional argument. To me, it was a little bit vague, but the court denied that request, and the court ruled that they're going to go with 6. And I believe in this case, they originally had 6 alternates.
Yeah, so now we're down, we've lost 2.
At least 2, right?
And will we know if it's an alternate versus a regular jury, and does that matter procedurally?
Yeah, well, it does. So you almost would have to, it's kind of weird because I haven't seen it like that play out, but you would have to think, if you have, how it works is the original jurors are sworn in. They know right away. They stand up, they take the oath. Then the alternates stand up and take the oath. So they know they're alternates. If you're just listening to the evidence, I don't think it matters. It would matter if you got into deliberations, okay? Because the alternates don't go in and deliberate with the original jurors. And so if one of those jurors fell out during deliberations, they would have to select an alternate and they would have to start all over again. But as far as when the trial's proceeding, I haven't seen it, but I'm thinking about it logically. There's no reason to restart because all the jurors have been there paying attention to the evidence as it's come.
So we're seeing with the most compelling testimony this week has certainly been the nanny, her emotional reaction of just knowing and feeling and sensing that something must have gone horribly wrong because she believed that Jennifer would always answer her phone and that she was afraid of her husband. Then we saw the DNA expert talking about the blood. And what stands out to you in that testimony?
Well, I think, with the nanny did really well. And I think what she did is she drove home the point how terrible this really is to everyone that's involved with this, the family, the kids, anyone else that's left. This poor woman dropped her kids off. She's supposed to be in New York City. She disappears. Basically, she's murdered. And, now people are trying to piece it together, what happened. So with the DNA expert, obviously there was a struggle that occurred. And there's no other way to explain it. I mean, there's blood on the car that's in the middle of the middle bay. There was 3 bays. It was a Range Rover. There was blood on the floor. There was evidence of a cleanup. I believe there was, supposedly, the nanny said, I think there was 12 paper towels, a full roll, and there was only 2. And then they found evidence later on, and the trash dump that things were, like blood. It was not only a shirt, it was undergarments. It was also some of the paper towels. There was Ziplocs. There's all sorts of things that's going to tie up ultimately. But I mean, the blood is going to establish that something bad happened to Jennifer in the garage. And
that's really what you're saying has to be done. They have to tell this juror and prove that she's dead. That's part of what has to happen in the beginning of this, what might be a 6-week trial. Right. It almost seems like Fotis Dulos is on trial, but you're saying that kind of has to happen in this case.
It does. They have to prove that Dulos, Fotis, no one else, but Fotis killed her. And it's kind of, I don't want to jump the gun, but it's kind of clear because I know what's going to come down the line. So, if all goes well for the state, that shouldn't be a problem to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Fotis was responsible for Jennifer's death. Here's the problem. How do you link it to Michelle? I don't know.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have been asking that. I mean, that's been the question of how are you going to convict her of conspiracy to commit murder. Her family and her all say she's completely innocent. They wanted a trial. They want to prove that she didn't know anything, even though she's in the car, allegedly, while he's dumping bags of bloody articles in the Hartford trash bins.
Well, I guess my question to you is, what does that mean to you? I mean, that's a question that needs to be answered. I think, you know, a different person might have a different opinion than I might have. Me, right now, I just have an open mind. Let's see what happens. I don't know exactly what's coming down the line, but I would expect that they at least have one person to testify that somehow Michelle's involved, and that person, quite logically, would be Mawhinney.
Okay, and that, just a little background here. What you're understanding is that, okay, he was already in jail, and he violated his bond when he got out. He got out, and he violated his bond with his GPS monitor. He was back in, and then all of a sudden he's out after talking to authorities. And in the world of court, that indicates perhaps he gave some information that could be helpful to authorities.
Oh, definitely. See, but whatever information he gave, it's not a secret. So it is to us, but it wouldn't be to John Schoenhorn.
He knows what Kent Mawhinney
said.
Yeah,
oh, absolutely. The state has an obligation to provide any type of information that Mawhinney may or may not have given. So Mr. Schoenhorn is lying in wait for whatever he may or may not have to say. Okay. You and I don't know that yet, nor does the jury, so let's see how it plays out.
And it's been so long. Let's just talk about that. I mean, people are, why did this has been so long? The pandemic played a role in why it's taking so long to get this case to trial. Talk about that.
Yeah, I can tell you just from my own personal experience. In Hartford, everything got backed up, so there wasn't trials for, you know, at least 2 years, okay? So they're trying to dig out because we have a trial list. Like when someone says, I reject whatever offer the state says, and I want to go to trial, so that's called a trial list. And there's literally probably 150 people in Hartford on it. And the judge is doing his best, who's in charge, to find the oldest case, say 2018, 2017, 2016, I mean, and work the way down. And they're roughly, to my knowledge, right around 2019, 2020 now, so we're still, you know, 3-4 years behind, but we're catching up. There's more judges. I can only speak to Hartford. There's more judges hearing cases. They're available, and there's a big push. They're doing a good job in Hartford, and they're doing the best they can to dig out, but it had a profound effect on this case. You know, for a lot of reasons, because I think they had their sights on Dulos, right? Fotis, that is. And once he killed himself, they had to say, well, what are we really going to do with this case, right? And it took some time and effort.
Well, and we're talking about the charges for Michelle Troconis. You mentioned this is almost in part trying Dulos in absentia, getting all that information that they had against him out, telling that story. We still don't have a body. She's charged with conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, hindering the prosecution. How difficult is this because there's no body, or is that not a big deal?
Well, if you're asking me, it's not a big deal because, and again, we're jumping the gun, but I know what's going to come down the line, so maybe I shouldn't comment on evidence that hasn't come in yet, but it's going to be probably really compelling that a murder was committed and the only person that could have done it was Fotis. Now, what's the link between Fotis and Michelle? I mean, that's $1 million question. And if they did have a conspiracy, to be honest with you, it'd be very difficult to prove. If you and I conspired to do something, you and I know it, but we're not going to write it down. We're not going to make it public. So how do you prove that? You do it circumstantially. And so, I mean, as far as I know, her being in the truck, I guess circumstantially would suggest she knew what happened and she was participating in trying to get rid of evidence, but did she really? I don't know. I mean, that's open.
Well, I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. You could say two things, right? You could say, if you're the boyfriend, do you tell the girlfriend that you just killed your wife? Maybe you don't want to say that to her because you're afraid that she's a mom of a daughter and you don't want her to go away. Or are you that comfortable to throw away bloody items in front of her?
I don't know, you're right. I don't think if you know, the fact is he murders his wife because they weren't divorced yet, he's going to come and say, hey, guess what I did today, Michelle, right? But then it begs the question, what did she really know? Why was she in the truck? We don't know I don't know the answers. I don't pretend to know the answers. I mean,
if you really wanted to cover it up and she doesn't know anything, I guess the prosecution rather could argue that if he wanted to hide it from Michelle, he wouldn't bring her along for all those things.
Well, that's a good point too. And think about it. If she really knew what happened, I mean, she would have had the opportunity to say to the state, look, I know what happened. Let me tell you what happened, and we can avoid this trial situation. But her position is, I don't know anything, right? I'm not guilty of anything, which is her right. And they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's why we have this jury. I mean, who knows?
So the hardest charge to prove is going to be the conspiracy.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so sometimes You know, the state, the prosecution, that is, when they charge an individual, I don't see it so much anymore, but there used to be, like, they would call it overcharging. So you would charge with, you know, it might be a murder, it might be an assault, it might be a possession of a handgun, whatever it may be. So you throw as much at the wall that can possibly stick, you get more evidence in. They don't do that so much any longer. So in this situation, it seems like for her, the strongest case, at least in my opinion, might be the other charges to prove, all right?
Okay.
But it doesn't seem that's exactly what they're trying to accomplish. And I think part of the reason why they charge it with the conspiracy, like we said at the outset, is to finally say, we proved that Farber Dulos killed Jennifer.
Right.
And that's part of the mission here. They're not going to say that, but I mean, I'm reading into that, but it kind of makes sense, right?
And we're only on day 6 of week 1. But at some point, the state is going to detail exactly why they believe Michelle knew about this murder.
Well, they're going to try to, right?
They're going to have to say that, right? If you want to
Well,
have conspiracy, we're going to hear more of how they're going to link. We just don't know yet because it hasn't been presented.
No, I agree with you. I'm scratching my head because I don't know either. I'd love to know what Mr. Mulwiney said. I have no idea because I'm not privy to that information. But he may or may not testify. I really don't know what they have up their sleeve, but they have something up their sleeve.
Is it safe to say that she would have been offered a plea agreement to avoid a trial at some point, or not really? They wanted a trial.
No, everyone's offered
Okay.
A plea at some point. You know, it's part of the process. I mean, it might be a very poor plea from the defendant's perspective. You know, oftentimes what the state will say if someone was murdered, right? The minimum is 25 years in a murder, the maximum 60 years, right? So they have a victim and a victim's family, and they might say, hey, we offered the defendant 25 or 30 years. He didn't want to take it, we're going to go to trial. That way, at least they say, and it's on the record too, by the way, so the defendant will have to say to the judge, I know what they're offering me, I'm going to reject that, I want them to prove it.
So the family from Jennifer Farber Dulos has said that they have had to be patient, but they look forward to justice in this case, and that this is really about, they've tried to keep the focus on Jennifer Farber Dulos. This is children who no longer have a mother anymore, or a father.
Right.
And we know about this alibi list, or the alibi note. That's something that I guess we expect to come in. But talk from your perspective as a defense attorney, is that a smoking gun that there's this alibi note of what they're doing?
Well, I mean, you know about it, right? If you're the defense, so, you know, I read a little bit about it, but what I understand, at least from reading from the warrants, is they both wrote out basically identical scripts in their own handwriting. When I say they both, that would be Fotis and Michelle. Supposedly at the direction of Fotis's divorce attorney at the time. You know, so if you're presented with this information, she's you know, disappeared. The lawyer probably doesn't have any idea what happened. He said, you know what? It's probably a good idea if you could go back and list where you were in case people want to talk to you.
Okay.
So that's
and they find that in the trash, and everyone makes a big deal of it. But you're saying that there needs to be more than that. That alibi note doesn't necessarily, on its own, imply guilt to Michelle Troconis.
Well, it wasn't truthful. Okay.
Okay. So there's some inconsistencies and some lies in there.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think if you had someone from law enforcement on, and if they're being honest, when they talk to people, you get versions.
Yeah.
And people aren't always candid right off the bat about their involvement in the situation. And you might say, well, you know what, I'm going to deny it. As time goes on, you know, eventually people might just say, okay, you know what, I'm going to tell you what happened. And so that might have happened here. You know, she could have said, look, okay, that was BS, but, you know, I still don't know what happened. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that we wrote these things doesn't mean that she participated.
Do we think that Michelle Troconis will take the stand?
Do we? You and I?
Okay. Do you think? Just, I mean, that's a big question. And would that even be decided by now?
No. Okay, in my own experience, what I'd like to do is see how the trial goes, okay? If there's something that you feel that your client can and should explain, and they're capable of doing it, then yes, why not? You have nothing to lose. But there's also the risk associated with that. And you know, that's an interesting question, because every defendant in a criminal case will have that moment of truth where the jury won't be in the room, but the judge will say, we need a decision from you. Would you like to testify or not? And then the person will say yes or no. And then the court is called a canvass. So they'll talk to the person and say, hey, do you really know what you're doing? In the sense that, have you been properly advised by your attorney? Do you know the pros and cons, the risks associated? So, you know, this is knowingly intelligent. This is your decision and yours alone. In her case, it's going to be her decision. Her attorney can say, I don't think you should, or I think you should. Ultimately, it's up to her.
Okay, so we don't know that yet. We'll see what will happen, but there's actually going to be a part where the judge is going to have to ask her, do you want to take the stand?
Yeah, so Kara, what happens is the state will rest at some point, and the defense can put on any type of witnesses that they want, but ultimately it's going to be, okay, are you going to testify or not? You make that decision, that election. And keep in mind, if she doesn't testify, the judge has already instructed and will continue to instruct to the jury that you cannot hold that against the defense.
So let me ask you one more question as we're coming on at the end of our streaming special, which thank you all for being here and streaming with us for free on WFSB Plus or our app. We will do this once a week to wrap up what's happened. So we think the big things, obviously, the juror problems, the nanny testimony, and the DNA testimony. You told me in our first special, this will ultimately come down to a couple of witnesses that will make or break the case. Is the nanny one of them? And what do you think about the witnesses we're seeing so far?
No, we're not there yet. So I think we talked a little bit about it. It's difficult to put together a case from the state's perspective. You know, they have to organize all their witnesses. They have to prepare them, subpoena them. It's a methodical process. They're kind of trying to put a puzzle together, right? And the first puzzle that they're putting together right now is that she died and photos killed her, okay? And that's the first part of the mosaic. And then as the case evolves, they're going to try to somehow bring Michelle into this puzzle or mosaic. We're not there yet. So they're basically just setting the stage.
So a lot more to come as we go into week 2.
Right.
Anything you want all the trial watchers and viewers to be aware of what you think is coming down the pike?
No, well, you know, I think I'd make a good juror because I have an open mind. I'm not deciding one way or another what's happening here, and I think everyone should just sit back and see what happens.
Yeah, and we have a lot of witnesses to get through. They've got nearly 200 on the list, or certainly well over 100.
Right, and things change all the time, so you got to keep an open mind.
All right, so Walter Hussey, thanks so much for being with us, and we will continue. I want to let everyone know that we are live streaming. When this special ends in just about a minute from now, you will be able to continue to watch the trial gavel to gavel, and we'll continue to see. But one important note is that the defense did not ask for a mistrial, and likely if he was going to ask for a mistrial over any of this juror misconduct, it would have happened today. He won't likely come back tomorrow and ask for that, or the next day.
Well, technically he could, but typically it should be timely. He knows what he's doing, so that's a tactical decision on his part.
Yeah, and Kent Mawhinney is the next, that's someone you want to hear from as far as that will be interesting to see what the state puts on with Kent Mawhinney.
Exactly.
All right, well, Walter Hussey, murder defense attorney and trial lawyer in the Hartford area, thank you so much for being with us. And want to let everyone hear, you can continue watching this case live from the courtroom on WFSB Plus. You can watch it on Android TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Just search WFSB where you get your apps. It will be streaming whenever court is in session, live and for free. You can also watch it on the WFSB app, and I hope you'll join us for Eyewitness News starting at 4. We will break down everything that's happened in court today and the most meaningful parts of testimony that have happened this week, as we are now 1 week down of what's likely to be a 6-week trial. I'm Chief Digital Angle Kara Sundlin. Thanks so much for being with us.